because the Messiah, Yahushua, can be exciting. He's amazingly exciting, but you've got to get to know him. And unfortunately, most churches do a very bad job of introducing their people, and especially their young people, to him. He's like this plaster image. He's not real to them. And I fell into the same trap myself. Plus, I was told lies by people that I was trusting with my soul. This priest lied to me about, the Lord being into the occult. And so you need to really be very careful about that. And you need to really introduce your children to the power of the Holy Spirit and help them find this without having to go into strange cisterns, to go into the sewers of the occult to find the thrills they want. Because everybody wants something that's exciting spiritually. We all have that hunger. We all have that hunger for a deep spiritual experience, and they're not finding it in most churches. Now, sure, there's exceptions. There's always exceptions. There's some wonderful churches out there.
Well, that's one of the things that I was working one time at a job that I had, and the guys that I worked with, they were all into haunted houses and going out to haunted houses and videotaping it and watching ghost shows and things. And they weren't Christians. They didn't claim to be. And I was like, why is it that you guys are so into this? I think you're trying to fill a spiritual void that is lacking within you. You're trying to fill the spiritual void. You need God, basically. And I never heard anything about it after that, because I think I'd hit the nail on the head, and I never heard them doing any, it was like silence. It was like, and I think that's what it was. It's like, we're searching to fill that vacuum, that hole that we need. And we're looking for God. And one other thing that you said was that you were wanting power. You wanted power to help people. You want to be a nice vampire. You want to be a nice witch. You wanted to help people.
Yeah.
But you said that you've experienced more power than any of all that other stuff since you've been Christian, experiencing it through God.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. I've seen amazing miracles since getting born again. Things that would put anything I'd ever seen in the occult totally to shame. And, but more than anything, I have been introduced to the wonders of heaven. And let me submit this to everybody that's listening. I mean, we all have this hunger for the wonderful, for something that just thrills us and takes us out of ourselves. And that's the lie that the occult offers, that all these different things we've been talking about offer, is that this is something exciting, this is something wonderful. And yet it isn't. It's all dust. It's all ashes when you finally get through it, because at the end of it, the devil is standing there laughing at you and saying, "You sucker." And that's just how I felt at the end of this journey. I felt like the world's biggest sucker, no pun intended. And, and heaven offers those wonders. Yahushua offers those wonders to us. The union with him, being able to become, free of your sins, free of your lower nature, and to walk literally in the light with him. That has been such an amazing experience. I mean, it's been 30 years this year since I got born again, 1984. And I wouldn't turn back for a second. It's just been more and more wonderful each and every year.
That's great. Any other questions? You can definitely call 888-919-2355. We've got about 15 minutes left of the show. We want to talk about werewolves. We talked about shapeshifters, werewolf shapeshifters. That stuff is real. You said you knew somebody that was a shapeshifter, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was a biker, Hell's Angel, actually. And that's what his avocation was. He was a werewolf.
So the shapeshifters, they actually shape not only into this like dog-like thing, but other forms.
Well, the common one is the wolf, but yeah, there are others too. And even in like Native American occult traditions, they have what's called skinwalkers. Mm-hmm. And supposedly the way you can tell a skinwalker is you'll see a wolf that never moves its tail. And that means it's actually a skinwalker, a human being that's turned into a wolf. And let me tell you a true story about a skinwalker. A friend of mine years ago, He is a Christian pediatrician, well-known man, if I told you the name. And he did pro bono work on a Native American reservation in the Pacific Northwest. And every week he'd go to this clinic, on the reservation, take care of the children. And of course, he'd tell them about the Lord, And anyway, he'd leave, and he always had to go and come through the gate, of the reservation. And he'd drive out, and there'd always be this creepy-looking old lady standing there in a blanket, and she'd just glare at him. And he said she looked like she was older than, whatever, the hills. And she just glared at him with these hateful eyes. And week after week, this would happen. And finally, one time he was driving out of the reservation, and he said it was still light out. And she was standing there, and literally, he said, in the blink of an eye, she was gone, and this large raven was standing there on the ground. And then the raven flew away. And this guy was a spirit-filled, born-again Christian. He was not on drugs, anything like that. And just in the blink of an eye, this woman turned into a raven. And she was obviously some sort of witch doctor or, medicine shaman or whatever word you want to use. And, this is, and as I talk about in the book, and we have a companion DVD called Vampires and Werewolves, Are They Real? This is a universal archetype. Every culture has the idea. I mean, in Asia, in Africa, the animal might be different. It might not always be a wolf. But that there are men or women that can shift and turn into an animal, and it is a reality. It's a terrible reality, but it is a reality.
And you haven't actually experienced it, but your wife did, sort of, one night.
Well, yeah, they had a. I finally got to see a werewolf about 8 or 9 years ago. But
go ahead and tell us about that one, because I know you have some stuff in your books. But
this just happened more recently, and basically, it was a very dark satanic holiday, and I was in my prayer room praying, and
was it Halloween?
No, it was a bigger thing. It was called the Feast of the Beast. Oh. It only happens every I think it's every 21 or 28 years. I forget exactly right.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, it's a major deal. It's, Halloween is kind of lesser. And anyway, so I was sitting in my room praying, and I had my King James Bible open by the window, and it was night. And all of a sudden, this thing breaks through the window. And it was this giant werewolf thing. It was humanoid, but it was a wolf. But it was on, 2 legs, but it leapt through the window, of course, head first. And it landed, how you can imagine if a large dog would jump through a window, the front paws would land on something to give it purchase. You know what I'm saying? Well, the feet landed on this open Bible. And as soon as it hit the Bible, it vanished in this soot. Literally, it just vaporized, and all it was left was this grease pot on the carpeting.
Oh my goodness.
It literally was vaporized because it touched the Bible.
Wow.
That's the power of the word.
Wow.
And, you try to explain that to your landlord, this werewolf broke in. And
what's this grease on the carpet?
It was a little strange. But anyway, so that was the only time I've seen one. But yeah, earlier on, and probably in the late 80s, my wife and her sister were out there in the Pacific Northwest where I was ministering, and this thing was walking around the house at night. I was down in Utah doing a conference, and at first they thought it was like a mountain lion or something because we had things like that around there. We were up in the mountains, but this was something that was tall enough to look into a 2-story window. And when it walked, it shook the ground, and the thing had to be 8 feet tall. And they were praying and pleading the blood of the Lamb and just doing spiritual warfare, and it could not get in. All it could do was walk around on the outside like a caged lion, back and forth growling, and finally it left. But yeah, they saw it. And, since then, we don't have time to get into the details, but there's many cases of people having sighted werewolves that we've had to minister to, and many of them are in the book and the DVD.
Romancing death you're talking about.
Yes.
And we also have more of your biography in the book Lucifer Dethroned, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the full biography there. Yeah, Lucifer
Wow.
Dethroned. And then we have our spiritual warfare manual, which is called Blood on the Doorpost. And of course, that we also have a smaller book on Wicca. It's just called Wicca, Satan's Little White Lie, and it deals with white witchcraft.
And a thing talking about Halloween as well. All there at your website, withoneaccord.org. That's withoneaccord.org. I'm going to put it up in the chat room. So you can look there at inceptionradionetwork.com for the link with oneaccord.org. And I mentioned earlier about the whole Mormon thing. The writer of the Twilight series, Stephanie Myers, she was a Mormon, and that was one of the things why I thought it was okay to watch, because for one, I thought vampires were a fantasy, and for two, I heard, well, it's based on like good morals. She doesn't sleep with her boyfriend before she gets married. The vampire doesn't want to do that, and then later on, they're very pro-life, anti-abortion. So in a way that draws people in. Oh, it's good, it's nice, but it's really not. It's quite dangerous. It's not.
Exactly, yeah. And you'll find there's some subtle hints of Mormon theology in the books, even though it's not obvious. But basically these vegan vampires, Edward and his family, quote unquote, who are kind of the hero figures in the book, they're like the Mormon deities, the Mormon gods. They're like glorified godlike beings in human form. Because, see, most people don't know this, but Mormons teach that the Heavenly Father is a man. He's got a body of parts and passions, just like we do. So he's not really like, our Lord said, that he's a spirit, that they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Well, the Mormons deny that. They say that the Almighty has a physical body, and he's basically kind of like a superpowered extraterrestrial. And that's kind of almost like what these vampires are in the book. They're almost all-powerful, glorious beings that glow. And unlike the vampire in almost any other fiction or in reality, these guys, or women for that matter, if they go out in the sunlight, they twinkle. They glow like diamonds, which is a real, twist on the traditional vampire thing. But it kind of fits in with this idea of the Mormon God being a man of unspeakable glory and just twinkling and glowing with light and everything. So, and it's a subtle deception. You said it exactly. It's a subtle deception.
Now, people might be a little freaked out tonight. I know Halloween's coming up and there's a lot of ghoulish stuff floating around, but when we're talking about this stuff as not fantasy, actually being real, vampires, werewolves existing, what's a person to do if they come into contact with one of these?
Well, first of all, I recommend people be born again. People become genuine Christians. I mean, just because you were baptized in a Lutheran church or a Catholic church or whatever when you were a kid, that doesn't necessarily make you a Christian. You have to believe in the Messiah with saving faith, accept him as your Lord, as your Savior, and then follow his commandments. And if you can do that, if you do that, then you will have him walking with you. The Almighty King of the universe will be at your side. And believe me, these demonic beings fear Christ. They totally are terrified of him. That's why when he was on the earth physically, he'd walk into a town and all the demons were like, they'd say, oh, what are you doing here? You're going to torment us before the time, So, and I would exhort parents as you get near to Halloween to really pray for your children, whether they're young children, whether they're adolescents, doesn't matter. Pray for them. Every time they go out of the house, pray for your children. Give them a hug, pray for them, and plead the blood of, the Almighty over them. And, realize that this is a perilous time for children, because there are Satanists out there and other beings out there that are trying to seduce your children. and draw them into the occult by the dark energies that are associated with this satanic holiday, because Halloween is a satanic holiday. It's a pagan holiday. And we explain this on our website. We have a DVD there, Halloween Unmasking Hell Night, and a lot of prayers. We have, under free resources on our website, we have a lot of prayers people can download to get more sample prayers of how they can pray for their children. Because let's face it, our children are our most precious resource, and we need to take care of them physically, but we also need to take care of them spiritually, because if we don't take care of them, someone else will, and that someone else guy has horns and a cloven hoof.
It's been so intriguing and interesting talking to you again, Bill. Fascinating stuff with oneaccord.org. And next time on Epic Voyages, we'll be talking with Dr. Heather Lynn, and Aaron Judkins will be along as well. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight, Aaron. And thanks so much for hanging out, Bill. It's been very insightful and very, it's been a good warning and a good insight and a good wake-up call for what exactly are we putting in to our minds and what are we meditating on. And you've seen so many things. Faith is the evidence of things unseen. You've seen so much of the supernatural, the evil side, the good side. One last thought. What do you still have to have faith for if you've seen so much of it?
Well, that's just it. You've seen a lot. I've seen a lot, but we don't even know what's waiting for us in heaven. It's so amazing. But you've got to know Christ to get there. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man cometh unto the Father but except by me.
Amen.
So,
well, thank you so much, Bill. And I know you also have an interest in UFOs, and that's what we talk about here in Inception Radio Network. Maybe sometime next year we can have you to talk about your book, Space Invaders.
That'd be great.
Be good.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks. And you, God bless. And Aaron, are you still with us, sir?
Yeah.
Well, Aaron will be joining us for another 2 hours of Epic Voyages. We'll be talking with Dr. Heather Lynn about evil archaeology and curses on ancient relics. It's going to be another interesting Halloween special for those of you who are able to listen on Inception Radio Network. It's coming up in the next 2 hours for those of you who are still able to listen. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Epic Voyages, I'm Whitney the Whitster.
Welcome to Epic Voyages Radio. I am Maverick, your host for this evening's special Halloween episode here on Epic Voyages Radio. Welcome all, welcome everyone. We're going to have a fantastic 2 hours with Dr. Heather Lynn on evil archaeology. It's going to be quite fascinating. This is a topic that really interested me. If you're listening on the Dark Matter Radio Network, welcome there as well. Re-aired on Friday nights. And all the Inception Radio listeners, welcome. Tonight, I'm going to have a guest host with me, Whitney Hall. Hello, Whitney.
Hello.
Thanks for being on the show. We're double teaming tonight. Whitney interviewed a fantastic guest on vampires the last 2 hours, if you missed it. It's a wonderful interview that you did there with Bill.
Oh, thank you. It was a good time.
So the next 2 hours is going to be really wonderful. The Halloween special here on Epic Voyages Radio for you tonight. So let's just introduce our topic here. Dr. Heather Lynn, Evil Archaeology, investigates the archaeological record for artifacts and evidence of evil entities. It also looks at the history and lore behind real relics believed to be haunted. Is there really a prehistoric fertility goddess figure that has been known to bring death to families or anyone who holds it? Is there real vampire graveyards? I got an interesting thing about that. Can the archaeological record prove the existence of malevolent entities? These are things we're going to be talking about tonight. And evil archaeology contains interviews and accounts from real-life exorcists and is not for the easily frightened. So, with that, hang on to your seats. Halloween special, Dr. Heather Lynn. Heather, welcome to Epic Voyages Radio.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I am so glad that you are on the program with me again. I've done something that I normally don't do. And as a matter of fact, I've not done this, is have a guest on back-to-back programs. And you're the first, Heather, to hold that honored. So we had you on last month, and I talked with you about the Sumerian controversy. And for you people who don't know Dr. Heather Lynn, archaeologist, self-proclaimed renegade, I should say, and fantastic work that she does. Go to her website, drheatherlynn.com. Is that correct, Heather?
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay, drheatherlynn.com, and it's DR for doctor, drheatherlynn.com. And tonight we're talking about your upcoming work. It's not out yet, but it's soon to be, on evil archaeology. What a fantastic topic. Let me just ask you something. What was the inspiration behind evil archaeology? Because typically when people think about archaeology, you don't think about evil associated with it. You know what I'm saying? What makes archaeology, in this sense, what's evil about it?
Well, let me just say that the inspiration is quite fitting for this time of year. Let me ask you, what to you is the scariest movie?
Oh, the scariest movie to me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you got me on the spot. Okay, let me think. I don't really watch scary movies because I'm too scared to watch them.
I hear that.
When I was young, I did go to the theater with one of my best friends, and we saw the movie Witchcraft. Now, when I left the movie, and I had just got my driver's license, by the way. I think I had it must have been all of 15 or 16 years old. And when I left the movie theater from seeing that, it scared me to death. I couldn't even drive the car back home. And we had to drive 15, 18 miles to the nearest town to go see a movie, so the drive back was quite bothersome for me. That was probably, for me, the scariest. I know there's probably been much more scarier movies out there. I haven't watched any of them, to be honest with you.
I've not seen that. Yeah, that's interesting. What about you?
This was back in the 80s, by the way.
I was always freaked out when I was little. It was one of the Indiana Joneses when they were going through with the eyeball soup and all that stuff. I think because it kind of had like a spiritual tie of, like demonic stuff, and that freaked me out.
That one freaked me out too. I have to say, my worst nightmare movie was The Exorcist. That one took it all. So I saw that at a far too young age. Let me just say that. I saw it when I was probably about 9 years old, and having been raised Catholic, you can imagine what that did to me. It scared me senseless. So in the beginning of the movie, it starts off in Iraq at an archaeological excavation. And at the site, the priest that's the subject of the movie, he feels this southwesterly wind blowing, and it's foreshadowing the arrival of the demon that ends up possessing the main character in the film. And the demon is actually a real, it references a real entity, or at least mythological entity, named Pazuzu. And that comes out of the Assyrian and Babylonian mythology. So I always thought that was something really interesting. And at the time, I was too young to really even, put it all together in my head, because that movie just scared me to death. It still does to this day. That just the tubular bells music, I have to run and hide when I hear that music. It's terrible. But the movie starts out with this archaeological site, which to me, that was just something very interesting. And it sort of stuck with me. And as I got to be a lot older, I was traveling across the country and I was visiting various churches and places of worship just to sort of do a little bit of ethnography.
Sure.
I came across, I was in a little town in North Carolina called Atkinson. The population in 2010 was less than 300 people. I went in 1999, I think it was. So we're talking a very, very small town. So I was there, and they have many, many churches. And one of them was this very small, it didn't look like a church at all. It was more like a house, although it did have kind of a handicap accessible ramp and some stained glass. So it was almost as though they took a house and modified it a bit to give it a church-like feel. So I'm visiting this church, and I happened to go in on a day or evening. It ended up being a whole night affair. But I went there with a friend who they were taking me there to see an exorcism. I did not know.
Like a real life exorcism?
Like a real life exorcism. And I didn't know.
And you were going to, like, as an entertainment thing, or what?
I suppose. I was going there thinking I was going to be introduced to the pastor. I was there to sort of learn about their church. I really didn't know that I was going to be, having ringside seats to a real life exorcism.
Oh my goodness.
And this wasn't the kind of church that I was familiar with either. Like I said, I, was raised Catholic and, had that same kind of religious experience every Sunday with the mass, and it was very calm, to say the least, if not boring. So here this church is, and it starts just speaking in tongues. There's all kinds of things going on, and I'm fascinated because that was my whole point, was traveling around to meet with different people and learn about other religions and customs and ways of doing things. So I was loving it until about the second hour, and things just started getting really wild. And the preacher was running through the pews and jumping from one pew to the other. And I was like, wow, this is very exciting. Well, they brought somebody in from sort of like there was a side door that was more towards the back near where the service was being held. And out of that side door came somebody on a stretcher, like a hospital bed, and they just wheeled them right along in. And I thought, wait a minute, this took a strange turn.
Yes, it really is. You've got my full attention.
So I'm watching, and I wasn't feeling the urge to speak in any sort of tongue or anything, but there were people that were they were rolling on the floor, speaking in tongues. It was quite a sight. And so here comes this bed that was being wheeled out. And it was more like an actual hospital bed because it had the, railings, and there was a person there and they were sleeping, or, well, at least they looked like they were sleeping. So they brought them in and they wheeled them to the front. And then, almost as if somebody had done this before, they just knew what was coming, people started coming up to the very front and surrounding this bed. And I thought, well, I guess I should be coming on up there. So I went up there to get a closer look and to, join everybody. And the preacher puts his hand on this woman and starts speaking in tongues, and I don't know what he was saying, but the woman started kind of writhing and wiggling, and this was starting to really freak me out.
This is the woman in the stretcher, right?
She was in the stretcher. Yes, it was more like just a hospital bed, because it was like she was really had maybe been there for a while. Okay. So not the kind of stretcher you'd use to take somebody in and out of an ambulance that breaks down flat,
like
but like a hard
bed.
Yeah, like a hardcore hospital bed.
Yeah.
And she's laying there. And this woman she looked to be around, maybe, she wasn't that old. She was probably in her late 40s, early 50s. Yeah. And so she's lying there, and the preacher puts his hand over her and starts speaking in tongues. Well, she starts wiggling and just kind of making these noises, and everybody else is speaking in tongues. And I kid you not, out of that same door where she had been wheeled from came a procession of goats. I have no idea why. This was goats.
No, wait a
animals,
minute. Did you just say goats?
I said goats, like
on the
goats.
farm goats,
like goats.
And so here comes a line of goats.
A line, probably
church.
about 4 or 5. A good amount. I mean, more than you'd expect to be in a church. So so these goats start coming in, and again, nobody else is really kind of like looking at this. And at this point, I have no idea what I'm looking at. There's a woman in a hospital bed. There's goats. People are speaking in whatever. And then there are these children, and they're also speaking in tongues, but they now start rolling on the floor and crying. And it becomes a really very anxious sight. And well, at this point, my friend, the person who had escorted me, who hadn't spoken to me the whole night, looks over and says to me, "Is there anything you want to confess?" And I was just like, "Not that I can think of right now." And she said, "Well, because they're going to do an exorcism." And for me, exorcism meant the movie The Exorcist, or, these images of Catholic priests saying all this and that. So I'm thinking, what is going on? And still nobody's explained the goats. So, which are just walking around, just aimlessly. I am just aimlessly.
And so they're ready to do an exorcism. And some lady approaches you and said, "Hey, we're about to do this. Is there anything you need to tell us before we start?"
Yeah.
And meanwhile, you're still confused about the goats.
I'm just freaked out at this point. I mean,
did you ever ask about the goats?
I did later. I found out a little bit later, but essentially, they started giving this woman an exorcism, and it got very violent. And she just, the bed was shaking, and people were crying and screaming, and it was just such a sight. And out of her voice, she kept saying, "Aloo, Aloo." And then the preacher was asking, "Is that your name? What is your name?" And she said, "Aloo." And that just blew me away. And so the night goes on, and this lasted probably from start to finish. From the point that they brought her out, it was another 2 hours.
Whoa.
So the whole evening, it was exhausting. The whole evening lasted about 4 hours. It wrapped up with the woman sitting up out of bed, and everybody was hugging and happy and clapping, and the goats were just walking around. And so that's when I said, once we were supposed to meet in another room, that was the room where the woman had initially been kept and the goats had been kept, we were all supposed to kind of go in there and meet, I guess, for punch and cookies. And
so
it was very strange. So we go in there, and that's when I happened to ask a little bit more, like, okay, so what was going on here? What was going on there? They said their reasoning for this was that the goats, each of them needed to be there in order to be the literal scapegoat for whatever.
Okay, absolutely.
Yeah. So
that's what
said,
I thought you were doing with, going with that.
I didn't know at the time. It just was like, why are there goats? Well, they had, and plus there were plenty of goats, but there were far more people, so that the numbers didn't make sense to me. But I was there to learn. I wasn't there to judge. So, they brought the goats. They said that now the goats, they're going to have to slaughter the goats, because if the demon came out, then and so luckily they did not do that in front of me or that night. I don't know what happened at that point, because after the whole, little punch and cookie get together, we split. And that stuck with me for a long time as one of the weirder experiences I had ever had. Later, as I've studied different things about ancient Mesopotamian religion, I've come across, a lot of different deities, one of which was named Alu.
Is this the same one that the lady was yelling out during the exorcism?
I can't be certain of that, because nobody there at the time told me that, or I don't know if they knew, or if it was just maybe a common utterance that could be, because it's not very complex grammatically. So, but I found it to be an interesting connection that the spirit Alu in Akkadian and Sumerian mythology was a demon that had no mouth, lips, or ears. And it used to supposedly roam at night and scare people while they were sleeping, and then actually possess people, resulting in unconsciousness. And so I never quite understood what the woman, why she was in a hospital bed, because she could walk.
Oh, she could.
She could walk. So still, I don't really know. I wasn't really allowed to know. I could only ask the person that brought me there. And there was this kind of weird vibe between me being an outsider and then these people at this church. And again, this wasn't in a different country. This was right up in North Carolina. Okay. So that's,
I've got so many questions already. I'm stuck on the goats. You know, you're right, though. Historically, there was a thing called the scapegoat. That's where we get the term from. And they would lay the, at least back in the Old Testament, they would lay the sin, the curse, on one of the goats. Now, they would just release one goat, and but what they would do is they would send it out in the desert as a symbolic thing. I've never heard of that, however, being practiced in today's religious ceremonies. It's very interesting that they did that. And as you were telling the story, it finally began to dawn on me that they were using the goats as a scapegoat. My question is at the end of this whole thing, did the lady get better? Did she come to her normal self, get up out of the bed, and was coherent and normal? And what happened to the first guy that you went in there to see?
Well, she did end up getting out of the bed. Afterwards, she was sitting up, like I said, and just kind of looking relieved and crying, and people were gathered around her, and they helped her out, and she actually walked with everybody into that other room. At which point, they had a kind of like a tub. It looked like a shower, or one of those things where if you're disabled, you can kind of easily get in and out of your bathtub. They had one of those, and they used that to kind of give her an impromptu baptism. And so after she had been baptized or, cleansed, she came back out and just sort of spoke, and people were talking to her. And it was just almost like a very celebratory atmosphere.
Yeah, but she seemed normal afterwards.
She seemed completely normal. And in fact, when they brought her in, other than the fact that she was lying there in a hospital bed and just sort of incoherent, there wasn't anything completely unusual about her, with the exception of when she started to speak. It was sort of like a guttural, growly type sound.
During the exorcism.
During the exorcism.
Not afterwards.
Not afterwards.
Yeah. It is interesting that in other religions, there is real exorcisms that occur. I watched it wasn't a movie, it wasn't fiction, but I watched a documentary on a Catholic priest whose specialty was exorcism, and it told how he got into it, and I wish I could remember the name of it. But it told how he got into it, what he had to do. He had to go to Rome, and he had to study for this. And the things that he saw and witnessed as he learned how to do this was quite frightening. It was disturbing, really, because these were things that he said was very, very real. He had no agenda other than to help people and to rid people of evil spirits, demonic entities, malevolent beings, spirits, and the things that he told in that documentary, and they reenacted some of those things that happened. It was really disturbing to me, because here is an independent source, saying, yeah, this is what I went through. I do this, this is what I do for a living. and it really bothered him. He had to actually make a choice if he was going to continue on, because it was so frightening. I think at first for him, but when he watched the main priest doing this, I guess he was in control, but things would happen supernaturally, happen. Like you said, Heather, the guttural voices from a female, growls, different things, and you hear about this throughout other religions. By the way, that entity you were talking about is on the cover of your book, Evil Archaeology. Is that correct? And if you go up on the chat room at inceptionradionetwork.com, I posted a picture of that on there. Is that the same entity you're talking about?
That is Pazuzu. That is the entity that comes. Well, it comes out of Akkadian in Babylonian mythology, but it was the inspiration for the movie and actually the book, and then the movie The Exorcist. So that's the one that's featured on the book. Because as I said, that the movie sort of, stuck with me as a very frightening film, and especially since they had the relationship to archaeology, and then later studying Mesopotamian mythology and coming across that, it just was something that struck me as worth looking into.
Yeah, absolutely. So go to, if you want to see the picture, go to inceptionradionetwork.com, click on the chat room. I posted it. You'll have to scroll back up a little bit. Whitney, if you could post that too, or you can go to
yeah, it's there. I saw it there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So fascinating. Whitney, what do you think about all this?
Well, I want to hear about these relics and the possession that we talked about the goats and that going into the goats. But what about these inanimate objects, these non-breathing living things being possessed?
Heather, before you answer that, we're going to go to break. We're going to take a quick break here on Epic Voyages Radio. Heather's going to be back for some more fascinating, riveting interviews on the Evil Archaeology, her new book coming out on the special Halloween episode on Epic Voyages Radio. Don't go away. Back here on Epic Voyages Radio with her special guest on the Halloween special tonight with Dr. Heather Lynn. Evil Archaeology, what a fascinating topic. Contains interviews and accounts from real-life exorcists, and Dr. Lynn's new book coming out soon, Evil Archaeology. Wow, what a fascinating thing. Okay, Whitney had a question for you. Whitney Hall is double teaming with me tonight. Whitney, hello.
Hey, well, earlier she had talked about an exorcism she had gone to, and about they'd brought in these goats so that the demons could go into the goats. And I'm assuming they're basing that, and there was at a church, that they're basing that off of Mark chapter 5. When I talked to our ex-vampire earlier on Epic Voyages, I brought it up. We were talking about what the demon would do to the person, and it was making them crazy. But let me read part of it. Jesus is talking to this demon-possessed man, and he replied, "My name is Legion because there are many of us inside this man." Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirits begged. "Let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs. And the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned into the water. So that sounds like It made the pigs go crazy. So they had to go into some other living, breathing thing. I want to know about if they could be sent into some object, some inanimate object, like a stone or whatever. I know both of you guys, Aaron and Heather, both archaeologists. Are you ever afraid of coming across some object while you're digging around that may throw a curse on you? How is that possible?
I am not ever really afraid, but it is something that, given the stories of the Pharaoh's curse and these things, it does kind of come to mind if you find something that might have a spooky face on it, or, but for the most part, I don't really have that fear, but it's something that I wondered very much, because some people have said that can happen. And, I've had a lot of people ask me that in the past. And so I thought, well, surely I need to research this a little further. And that was another motivation for me to write Evil Archaeology. That's the primary thing I was looking at, other than just the history of demonology in general. I wanted to sort of answer the question of, are there really evil spirits that we can prove without a doubt through the archaeological record? And can evil spirits get into an inanimate object? If you accept that they can get into an organic being, then like a possession, then could it also go into a relic? So I ran across a lot of different things in researching. And again, I'm not all the way through. So if anybody has anything, any stories or relevant information they'd like to send me, they can do that at heather@drheatherlynn.com. I may just feature it in the book. But currently I found it's called the Woman of the Lem, or sometimes referred to as the Goddess of Death. It was a prehistoric fertility goddess. And that had a lot of stories about it having some kind of a curse that would literally kill the family. Well, let's just say it didn't kill, but its possession, when whoever had it, their whole family would succumb to this bad luck that ultimately ended in death. And so it had 4 separate owners, all of which died or had families that died under really odd circumstances. And I have scoured the internet looking for evidence of this, because there is an actual statue. There's a lot of pictures of it in this. And what I found is that it's a hoax. And I know. And that's one of the best ones out there. And so, I mean, it had all the stories, it has pictures, it has so many leading sources also citing it as a real artifact. And it is a real artifact. It's the Lemba Lady, but it currently resides and has always resided in the Cyprus Museum. Well, at least since 1970 when it was first discovered. So it's not killed anybody yet.
Well, don't you think that there are objects out there, though, that, that could possibly have a curse on them? I don't know, like King Tut's tomb when they found it.
Yeah, that's a big one.
They had some mysterious things happen to those guys, just within the recent times of them excavating King Tut. I mean, the Egyptians had the Book of the Dead. I mean, what do you think about all that? Do you think that's possible?
I think that I some of the more interesting information that I have found about specifically the Pharaoh's curse or the mummy's curse is this idea that there was sort of a curse, but it had more to do with the toxins, biological toxins that were released in the excavation process, affecting people and later like harming them and causing diseases and problems. So
antivirus and all that stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's that. And then there's just, who's to say, really? I wouldn't rule it out, because I'm not one to say that I know everything or that's impossible or that could never happen. But so far, I have not found anything compelling, but that's the reason I'm researching, because I have a feeling that there could be something like that. I know that things like Ouija boards and have been said to be haunted, and those are quite scary to me. So I know that a lot of people who've had bad experiences with Ouija boards and
but that's dealing with something else other than like an archaeological artifact. By the way,
they're kind of summoning this, they're like,
yeah, exactly.
But if it could be done in the present with something like a Ouija board,
right,
it could stand to reason that it would have been done in the past or could have been done in the past. And then if that object were to be buried and then refound, then maybe it still carries that negative energy that was first put in it.
The ancients, they worshipped a lot of different gods and goddesses. I mean, by the way, one of our listeners posted in the chat room. I was talking about the Catholic priest who was in the Exorcist thing. That was from the show Paranormal Witness, and it was called The Exorcist on the show Paranormal Witness. So they posted it up on the website. I'm sorry, in the chat room, and that's totally it. That's the one I saw. So thank you for posting that, because when I watched that, and listen, if you go and watch it, a rerun of the thing, and if you get freaked out and if you get creeped out about the thing, don't write me a letter, okay? I don't want to hear it, because I warned you. I warned you it's going to be creepy, okay? Not just because it's dealing with exorcism, but the fact that it wasn't even fictional. It's real, according to the priest who does this for a living. Wow, it's spooky. Okay, so one of the things that has come up is this prehistoric fertility goddess that's commonly referred to as the goddess of death. It's believed to be haunted. Heather, what do you think?
Yeah, that's the one that is the woman from Lem statue, and I don't believe it's haunted at all, because it's in the museum to this day, and it's never exchanged owners. So I know that one is actually a hoax. So unfortunately, that is a very interesting one, but that is the one that I thought might have the most evidence behind it. But alas,
what about another museum piece? The Hope Diamond curse. That was passed through many hands and seemed to be not such a good luck charm talisman.
Yeah, that one I almost believe. I went to the Smithsonian on vacation once and stood in front of the Hope Diamond, and just looking at it, it's so beautiful, but it's almost mesmerizing. So I could see how it could have some kind of a lore attached to it. So I do think that it's probably the one that I'm going to be looking at a lot closer in researching my book, because there's a lot to say that it does have a curse of some kind, and that's pretty much all I can say on that. Well, I'm not quite sure if it's demonic. I don't know if it's
just a lust for a lust, and it causes evil because you're like the love of money.
And that's one of those things that it makes me wonder, are all of these items or any of these things, are they cursed from actual demons or evil entities that could have a name or a history? Or is it the negative intention and negative energy that's associated with it that is sort of, infused with this item and possibly caused it to seem cursed? And that's something that, I really want to find out the answer to, because I'm not real sure.
Heather, have you heard of the ancient Egyptian statue over at Manchester Museum that the curator said moves on its own? Yes. And they set up a camera and turned the thing on when they closed the museum. I saw this. I saw the footage of it. Just Google ancient Egyptian statue moves on its own. I mean, and they got video footage of this statue, and it moves. I'm just saying it moves from like all the way across the room, but if they had it turned one way, it's turned the opposite way. And when they walk in the next morning and open the museum, here's this heavy statue, and it's turned the other way. And then they said, okay, well, we're going to turn it this way. And the next morning they come back and it's turned the other way. Or have you heard anything about that? That's
We're
creepy.
Not talking about Mona Lisa's eyes.
I told you it's a Halloween special.
It is quite fascinating, and the video is creepy. But
okay, you've seen it.
I have seen it, and it's creepy, and it is really just wow. But unfortunately, what they said, they had an engineer come look at it, because this was a mystery to everybody. I know, right? I'm just.
Okay. Are you fixing to burst my bubble?
I might be. So.
Okay.
But the engineer came back to look at it and found that the vibrations from a nearby road caused the figure to rotate because it had a convex base, so it made it more susceptible to spinning than the other artifacts around. So
that's a likely answer from an engineer. Just saying. Yeah,
exactly.
I don't know. Yes, it's a very plausible, it's a very logical explanation. It's something that we can reason. Sure. I would say, let's pull out Occam's razor on this thing.
Exactly, but it's a very heavy statue, and
well, exactly. And here's my thing: if that's true, which it obviously is, a very reasonable explanation. Vibrations can cause things to move. Sound does that. But why wouldn't the other objects around it be vibrating off the shelves and turning around? Why would that specific one? And if you see it in the video, it's only that one turning. None of them else is like vibrating off the shelf and falling or turning. I don't know. To me, that seems like, okay, that's really the only thing that could explain. But does it really, truly explain the movement of the statue moving at Manchester Museum? I don't know.
It is interesting. I do think that given that it has a more of a rounded bottom than the other things, that would definitely explain it, even with the weight, because just the way that the gravity would work on it. But my question would be, why not move the statue someplace and see if it still moves?
Yeah.
Move it away from where they can detect the vibrations, then film it and see if it's still moving. Then I'd believe it. Then I'd be freaked out.
Okay. It's up on the HuffingtonPost.com. The video's on there. If you go to ancient Egyptian statue moves on its own, you'll see the video there. And I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. Why would that thing be moving on its own and nothing else is? It's interesting that they give a scientific explanation that may well indeed be what is happening. But, the other side of me goes, I don't know, maybe not.
I have a question about symbols. Like if symbols could maybe have some sort of possession or, I had somebody from the chat room say, because last time we talked with an ex-vampire and they said, Bill mentioned something about making a coffin and carving symbols on it. Could those be haunted or demon-possessed coffins to aid in his transformation into a vampire? Well, we don't have Bill with us anymore right now to chat, but I know he has talked about like symbols being bad. And I have experienced a friend of mine, she... her parents made her move into as a family, they moved into this house and she could just feel this awful vibe about it. Like that it was something had happened there. It just was not good. And, she was just like restless. And, so after, I guess, a few months of being there, a few weeks or something, it was just driving her crazy. She felt like she should pull up the carpet in the bedroom, and underneath the carpet, she found a pentagram. And like, cause she just felt this vibe there. And then like, I guess a few days later or something, there was from the previous owner of the house had subscribed to some witchcraft catalog or something. And the witchcraft catalog came in the mail. So she's like, okay, whoever lived here before us obviously was doing something. And that's why that pentagram is on the floor. So there's that kind of like that dark spirit possession she could feel in the symbol. Have you heard of anything about those symbols?
Oh yeah, there's a lot. Symbols carry so much, and they're often. I mean, anything can be a symbol. So, I definitely think that there could be something to do with that. I know specifically pentagrams and even circles on the floor or triangles have been used in conjuring up spirits and demonic entities. So, yeah, I think that symbols carry a lot of weight and could do something like that if this were possible. So I know there is a grimoire from medieval time called the Key of Solomon, whose authorship is attributed to King Solomon. It was supposedly King Solomon's instructions for making a pact with a demon. So in that's
interesting.
It's the Middle Ages, the story was passed around saying, because of the Key of Solomon and other publications that sort of told the same story of King Solomon acquiring his wisdom and his riches with the help of an army of demons called jinn. So the idea is that he made a pact with these demons and that they would help him and whatever, and he became master over them. But in the pact with the demon, he describes how you're supposed to do that. And in doing so, you take, there's wands and candles and whatever, but what you're supposed to do is draw a triangle on the ground or floor with bloodstone and place the candles on the side of it. Then you stand in the middle of the triangle and hold a wand and recite the required invocation. And when all that is finished and some other things that are told and said and done, you're supposed to conjure up the demon. They're then in your control, and then you tell them what you want and then dismiss the demon. And so there was a lot going around in the Middle Ages having to do with King Solomon and how he was able to conjure demons and make them sort of slaves to his will. Therefore, you can too, with all these grimoires, and they have all these detailed ways on how to have pacts with demons and do that. So,
well, this is going back to the Middle Ages, to the Renaissance, right? Or
the 16th and 17th centuries. Yeah.
Okay, so these are parchments that exist back
Yes.
then. They don't necessarily go all the way back to King Solomon himself. Correct. In the Old Testament scripture that we know of.
Exactly.
Do you think that could, I don't know, throughout history, throughout time, do you think those parchments could have, I don't know, what do you think that goes back to? What is the root of that? Is that Gnosticism? Is that deism? What exactly is part of that?
That's a weird one. That one has popped up over and over again. This constant idea of the Solomon and his demons. So I think I don't think it has something to do with Gnosticism per se, but I think that it has more to do with the whole idea of Renaissance magic, people trying to have magic spells. And there was this, Renaissance meaning reborn. They were looking back at these newly found or interpreted ancient texts, generally from the Library of Alexandria, that had been reinterpreted and then purchased and then translated again. And so it was this bounty of all these new ancient documents. And so with that came a lot of other people spinning off other versions. And so, they found some old things. It became an industry. And so a lot of grimoires were put out and claimed to have this ancient connection, which gave it more credibility. That was all the rage, was having reclaimed ancient wisdom translated and now given to the public. And so a lot of, I guess, fake or hoax things came about. And most people tend to agree that the Key of Solomon was not written by King Solomon. It's been pretty clearly proven that was a Renaissance concoction, but it's one of many. So it was just a thing where everybody, it probably had to do with documents that they found that went back, that could be traced to Alexandria. And at the time in Alexandria, there was this confluence of cultures. There was, Islamic beliefs and Christian beliefs, and it was this cosmopolitan area where a lot of ideas started mixing, and so there's a lot of influence.
Isn't Gnosticism part of the idea of trying to get knowledge, the idea of the knowledge and ancient knowledge? Wouldn't that work into what they were trying to do? Because it seems like throughout history, the ancient cultures were always seeking not necessarily wisdom, but they were seeking, like we know King Solomon was a man of wisdom. But isn't there a difference between wisdom and seeking knowledge? Because not all knowledge is good. There's knowledge that is out there now that we know is not necessarily meant for us. Isn't there a difference?
Well, I think that you could generalize it and say it was a form of Gnosticism in that sense, because at the time they wouldn't have called themselves Gnostics anyway. There were all these different little cults and groups that had different beliefs, but a lot of them came out of these just rewritten works, and they were attributed to older times. So you have like the Gospel of Judas, or the Secret Gospel of John, and so you would have more of a at the time modern belief system, but in order to legitimize it, you could attach it to much older myth or story, in which case you have those grimoires and things of, here's how to conjure up demons and make magic circles or triangles or whatever. And it's legitimized by saying that it was originally written by King Solomon. So that was that. So it's a very common attempt that way in Gnosticism generally to get those ancient texts, but then, just merge them with whatever beliefs are going on at the time for whichever little group and whichever little region.
Okay,
but,
sure.
Yeah, ultimately attaching them to something in antiquity to give it more of a solid footing.
Where do we get gargoyles from? Because I go around, I travel quite extensively, and sometimes I see on buildings and courthouses gargoyles at the top, and they're kind of surrounding the perimeter, of the architecture of the building. What are the gargoyles about?
Well, that's interesting because you do find them all over the place. It's not just, in Christian churches or ancient Gothic cathedrals. It's pretty ubiquitous. So there's a lot of different explanations for it. I know one that was told to me, and this was literally the reason that was given to me in an archaeology class in college once. It was, because the artists started to have more freedom of creativity in their work, and this is what they chose to do to keep themselves entertained.
Or they were on drugs.
I was like, well, I don't know about all that. It seems like a very simplistic thing, although some of them are quite comical. And there's a couple in Sweden that look to be as though they're fighting, and they have like goofy faces, and so I couldn't really say for sure where those originated. I know that the ancient Egyptians and Greeks and Etruscans had animal-shaped water spouts and different things that would later be like gargoyles. They sort of had the same image, and sometimes were seen as a protector spirit or even something to ward off.
Yeah, that's.
I've heard warn people.
Yeah, that they've been like protectors. Okay, we're going to go to break. We're going to be back here with Dr. Heather Lynn on the Halloween special topic, Evil Archaeology with Dr. Heather Lynn. Wow, what a fascinating show. One more hour to go here on Epic Voyages. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here on IRN and the Dark Matter Radio Network. And we're back here on Epic Voyages Radio with our special guest, Dr. Heather Lynn, and her book, Evil Archaeology. What a fascinating Halloween special we're having here on Epic Voyages Radio. If you have a question for Dr. Heather Lynn, call us on our toll-free number, 1-888-919-2355, 1-888-919-2355. That's your question for Dr. Heather Lynn on our show, Evil Archaeology. Or go to the InceptionRadioNetwork.com, hit the chat room button and type your question, and we'll make sure we'll try to get it on the air. Heather, we were talking about relics and things that could possibly be possessed. We're talking about exorcism in the first hour. But there's some fascination, it seems, today where people are still, how should I say, worshiping or following or practicing some ancient religious cults that were practiced back in the day. And some people are still doing that. And there's a recent account of some people that you know of that are still doing this kind of this ancient paganism, I guess is a good term for it. What is all that about?
Well, as I was researching the Pazuzu and different Mesopotamian deities, it was almost serendipitous. I found a news story that was very recent that was about a man in North Carolina, but it's a man and his wife, but primarily the man who he changed his name legally to Pazuzu. So his name was John Alexander Lawson, but he changed it to Pazuzu, and he got himself tattooed up in all these different crazy, what he claimed to be Sumerian symbols, although a lot of them look like two scribbles. And he also claimed that he was practicing a sort of Sumerian religion. At least that's what he told his psychiatrists. Really doing was worshiping Pazuzu, and he was ritualistically sacrificing small animals and doing all these things at what he called the Black Moon. Pazuzu. Well, the reason we know about this is because it didn't stop with animals. He actually was arrested along with his wife for killing and eating and burying people in his backyard in the name of Pazuzu.
Whoa.
So,
okay. Hold on. This guy's really doing this. He's worshiping a Sumerian god and killing people and burying them in his backyard, including his wife.
Yes, the wife. He's 20, Amber Colbert, and at least he claims that that's his wife. They don't know if they're actually legally married, but anyhow, they were both arrested a couple weeks ago for doing this. So this is really new. He's 35, she's 24. She comes from kind of a, however. So she sort of just went along with it and, helped him literally bury the bodies. But this man in particular, he went so far as to legally change his name to Pazuzu.
Mm.
And this is a few weeks ago in North Carolina.
In North Carolina,
What were they doing exactly?
They had a suburban, they looked like a normal couple given their crazy tattoos and different things. But their house didn't seem out of the ordinary, but in their backyard were bodies that were buried. He claimed, he was interviewed by psychiatrists, and when he was interviewed, he said he was worshiping Pazuzu, and he was part of the cult of Pazuzu, and that he had to give offerings. And so, this is something that really, it's disturbing for one, but it makes me then wonder more about one of the questions I pose in the book is it possible to be possessed? And is this what it would mean, or this what it would look like to be possessed? Or is it always this sort of, speaking in tongues or guttural sounds or something that we see in a very Hollywood sense? Or can it be this? I argue that.
I would have to think that, evil begets evil. And if you're killing people and, sacrificing people and burying them in your backyard, I think that's a lot different than someone in church that may be speaking in another tongue. At least they go home and go to bed, and and your neighbor doesn't try to come and get you. I think there's a very clear difference. Evil knows evil, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, maybe the evil is so much so that it wouldn't be able to be exercised in some small fashion that way. Who knows? I mean, maybe bringing out a couple scapegoats literally wasn't necessarily the formula for something in this case, or perhaps it's a matter of the person being a willing participant. It's what is possession but an evil spiritual entity inhabiting a willing person that encourages them to do things in the name of that demon. So, I mean, you could say, these were just criminals probably suffering from psychological disturbances, or maybe the Pazuzu spirit found a willing avatar to carry out his horrendous acts.
Wow.
In his name specifically, because he did so in his name. And I mean, so that it brings you back to that question. What does this mean? What is possession actually? And, if you think about even inspiration, it comes from a Latin word meaning to breathe or to blow in. So the word originally used to describe a supernatural being that would impart an idea onto somebody. So if a person can be inspired by a demon like Pazuzu, could it not be then maybe taking on the spirit of it? And I don't know. These are some of the things that I question, and I wonder, because this was very disturbing. Somebody actually,
it really
adamantly
is disturbing.
So just in time too. It was right after I released, I think, the book cover, and then I get this news, and I'm like, oh, great. That's, people will Google Pazuzu.
There's a question in the chat room. They want to know what your thoughts are on sphinxes.
Sphinxes, and whether or not they're demonic, or just in general?
I guess in general, they didn't really specify on there, but what's your thought on sphinxes? Because you have, the head of a female, the body of a lion, you got wings, you got, these different types of sphinxes. What's all that about?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really interesting. I know that a lot of Mesopotamian deities, some demons, some not, they had very similar looks to them, just kind of like a chimera, So
yes,
and being that they're placed at entryways, often it could be something similar to gargoyle, warding off evil, or So I'm not real sure, but they could definitely be demonic, I suppose, but I don't know that all of them would be. I know that the early Christian church father Tertullian said that every spirit is winged, and both angels and demons are winged. So, it was just something that they believed in back then, that even in not only Sumerian and whatnot, but that pulled up into the Greco-Romans and then into Christianity and so on and so forth, that even demons had wings. So all through that art, you'll find, these winged deities. And so if they have a bull's head, a person's head, whatever body, generally if they're either a demon or an angel, they have wings. So it's not exclusive to just angels.
So we're going to patch Dr. Heather Lynn back in, reconnect with her on the board here. Hopefully we'll get a little bit clearer sound. I think we were losing her somewhat and breaking up. So stand by, because the internet gremlins are out tonight here on the Halloween special. I don't know why, but I guess they know we're doing the Halloween show, maybe. So what do you think, Whitney? Stand by. We'll get her back on here. Interesting show, though, Whitney. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it just really kind of ties in with all of our stuff talking about, well, is this stuff really fantasy or is it really real? And Halloween, we kind of, as a society in the United States anyway, we just kind of make light of it. Oh, it's just all fantasy. They're just dressing up to get candy. And
right.
And then tonight we're really talking about, well, let's take a look. Where is this really coming from? And, could this actually be real? And
I think we have Heather back. Heather, are you on?
I am. Is this better? Can you hear?
Okay, there she is. Yeah. Sometimes this happens. It's okay. We'll persist and move forward. Whitney, you had a question for Dr. Lynn.
Yeah, well, earlier I was talking with an ex-vampire on Epic Voyages, and so there's the idea of vampire graveyards and that whole idea of dead people turning into vampires. And what's the deal with that? If you dug up somebody, could they actually turn into a vampire or whatever the fictional, whatever they twist it with different shows? Has there been proof of some vampire grave sites or graveyards?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was a big frenzy a long time ago. People thought that there were vampires and that they had to ensure that once they were dead, they were really dead. So there have been plenty of discoveries of skeletons that have had iron rods impaled in their bodies where their hearts would have been. And I know in Bulgaria, they found a lot of dead bodies that had head wounds and different objects trying to hold them down, just different stakes, and almost as if just desperate, and not just one stake, but so I think there's definitely a real fear of that. I know there have been some found in Italy, and even recently they're finding the burial sites all over the place. So
and even in Bulgaria
graveyards.
too.
So they find that people believed this enough to take measures when people died. I think in one of Bill's books, he said something like, if you committed suicide, you would turn into a vampire or something. I don't know. But is there any proof of people actually turning into vampires from after being buried?
I don't really think so. I don't see that there's any proof of that, but there's definitely proof that people believe that wholeheartedly, because the measures that they went to ensure that these dead bodies wouldn't rise again were, pretty hardcore. So
Yeah,
they believed it.
Any
We have a
recent?
question.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, we have a question on the chat room. One of them is, let me see. What about specific places of evil, like the Nazi death camps or battlefields? What do you think of that, Heather?
Well, I think that without a doubt, this is not scientific, but my personal opinion is that those types of places retain the energy, the negative vibration, whatever you want to call it, they retain something. So often you can get a person who may not even know what went down at a site, and they can get there. And if they're sensitive to that kind of thing, they have the negative feelings. They may not be able to identify exactly why, but the places seem to retain some kind of negative feeling if something to that extreme has gone on there. That's something that I spoke with a few psychics about while researching my book, and they feel very strongly in saying that sites do retain negative energy and can be haunted. So if there's ever a place that's going to be haunted, I think it would be a Nazi death camp for sure.
Well, and that's, I mean, you got to think, these are places of mass deaths where people have died by the thousands. Even the Civil War battlefields, at Gettysburg,
with the shared misery too.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely.
Not just
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, my mother-in-law, she said she went to one of those, I think maybe it was Auschwitz, and she said she could feel it. She could feel that, like, I really shouldn't, like, maybe I should just turn around type feeling, Yeah,
I think that, a lot of people have that, even if they're not psychic or sensitive or whatever. We all have that feeling sometimes where maybe we're being watched, or, there's just something behind us, or there's something there. We all have a sensitivity to some extent or another. And I think that, places like that, I could definitely see those holding some kind of a negative haunting or possession or what have you.
What about, we were talking about images and artifacts. What about the Capuchin crypt? What is the Capuchin crypt?
Oh, that is a frightening sight. You would, upon looking at it, it's very Googleable. So if anybody wants to just Google it, you'll see exactly why it's frightening. But it is a structure that's outfitted with the skeletal remains of 300 cartloads of deceased friars, totaling what they think would be at least 4,000 bodies. So these bodies were transported, from their old monastery to the church that they're now entombed in like it was 17th century. So it's 6 total rooms of just nothing but bones, and not just piles of them, but just very ornate, decorated, themed kind of rooms. So in one room you'll have it's actually called the crypt of pelvises. And so you imagine 4,000 pelvises, human pelvises, fashioned in kind of like candelabras or columns or wall hangings, and very elaborate, very ornate. There's one called the crypt of the resurrection. It has a picture of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, and it's framed by various parts of the human skeletons. So there's a crypt of legs and bones, and it's just an absolute gruesome sight to see.
When I was in Peru, I went out to the Changos City of the Dead. It's 17 acres of sand dunes, of desert, and it's nothing but human skeleton bones scattered for 17 acres on the surface of the sand. And I have never walked through anything like that in my life. And, these are, a culture that are pre-Inca. And you have skulls laying on the surface of the sands, half buried, femurs sticking out, some elongated skulls, some normal skulls. And, I'm walking through there with L.A. Marzulli, and we're looking at this, the City of the Dead, we're walking through it, and you get creeped out, I'm used to walking through a grave, cemetery that's got some grass and some headstones, and I'm not used to walking through a place where bones are scattered everywhere. It's really a creepy feeling when you go to these places. And I think you're right. There's something that's just, it doesn't set well with you, when you go to these things and experience this. It's just I think, I don't know, maybe it's just part of, I don't know, maybe that energy that you're talking about. I think it affects us.
Yeah. That, and I think it reminds us of our own mortality. In the one of the crypts, there is a placard that actually has in 5 different languages a warning that reads, "Who are now we used to be, what we are now you will be." So it's what you are now we used to be, what we are now you will be. So it's sort of like a macabre, take a look at what all these skulls and whatnot. This is, your future. It's really morbid, to say the least, but it is, to see so many human lives just strewn about like that is disturbing. But I think what makes this Capuchin crypt so extra frightening is the great lengths they took to display the parts in things that we would recognize even today, like chandeliers or, so it's just disturbing. It almost relegates the human body to just another building material. And I think maybe that's another reason that, it just doesn't sit well. It used to be that women weren't even allowed to go visit, and it was only open once a year for a small donation to people on All Souls Day. So
we got a question in the chat room. Can you think of a good spirit that could be attached to some item or relic? Is there a good spirit that can attach to something?
Well, I think that just the argument that a bad spirit can attach to something would lend credibility to the idea that a good spirit could. I can't think of any specific example right off the bat, but I know that there are a lot of people who feel that they have blessed items, whether it be things like Bibles or rosaries or just anything of personal value that way, and it brings them a sense of protection or, positive feelings, maybe even a good luck charm. So I think it's possible, but I don't know of any right off the hand. Maybe that's something I should do a follow-up book on is, heavenly archaeology instead of evil, something more positive.
Oh.
I might have to do something like that to cleanse myself after all this. Yes.
Yeah, interesting. We're talking with Dr. Heather Lynn, author of the soon-to-be newly released book, Evil Archaeology, Investigation of the Archaeological Artifacts and Evidence of Evil Entities. What a fascinating topic. I tell you what, we're going to go ahead and, let's see, let me just look here. We're going to go ahead and go to break. It's almost at the bottom of the hour, so we're going to go to break, and we got one last half hour with Dr. Heather Lynn. So I want you to call in 1-888-919-2355. If you have a question for Dr. Heather Lynn, now's your chance on this last half hour. 1-888-919-2355. So great show. We got 30 more minutes. Hang on, because this special Halloween episode on Epic Voyages Radio is going to continue right after the break here on the Inception Radio Network and the Dark Matter Radio Network. And we're back here on Epic Voyages Radio with our special guest, Dr. Heather Lynn, on this Halloween special in October 2014, Evil Archaeology. What a fascinating hour and a half we have already had. 30 more minutes with Dr. Lynn here on Epic Voyages Radio. Call in with your question, 1-888-919-2355, 1-888-919-2355. So it doesn't hurt. Pick up the phone. Call in with your question. This is an interactive show. That's why it's called radio. So call in with your questions. I have a special guest host with me tonight, Whitney Hall. You might have heard her on the last program on the first 2 hours of Epic. So Whitney.
Howdy. Hello. Yeah, that number again for you guys to call in and chat with us, 888-919-2355, 888-919-2355.
We're having a fascinating show here with Dr. Heather Lynn on our Halloween special. Heather, we have talked about exorcisms. We have talked about hauntings and relics and all kinds of. We've talked about North Carolina. So if you're listening from North Carolina, we apologize. But really, in all sincerity, some of this is kind of, it's not just fascinating, but some of it is evil in origin. And I don't know, what kind of vibe do you get when what's the sense of your book, Evil Archaeology? Are you saying, hey, this is, not too bad, or hey, we need to be careful with what we bring in and we hold dear,
It's a warning. It's definitely a warning of, let's just be careful about what it is we're looking at and dealing with, and even what we say. I know I spoke with somebody recently. They were asking about my project, and they didn't want to utter the word. They said they didn't even want to say the demon's name because they were just so afraid that would be enough to invite it in. So, I mean, there's a lot there that we need to be careful of, I think. So. Even if it's superstitious, I wouldn't want to take a chance. I would hedge my bets that, there's something real out there and I'm not messing with it.
I'm sitting in the office here from the Valley of the Giants in the Texas Hill Country. And in my office, I have a number of artifacts from around the world. Most of them are cast, by the way.
Copies.
I do have to qualify that statement because I do have real artifacts, but the ones that come from out of the country, some of those are cast of the real thing. They're museum grade cast. Why? Because you can't take the real ones out. There's only one of those. But I have been able to get cast of some of these artifacts that you would see at the museum. Obviously, you only have one Rosetta Stone. You can't, unless it goes around, on tour. There's copies of these things available for other museums. And I don't know about you, Heather, but I've kind of wondered. I have things, these artifacts, and I'm thinking, I wonder, if I should bring this in my office. Whitney, you have, you're in the Dallas Fort Worth area. We've known each other for several years. Whitney's been a guest at my house.
I've been in your office. Yeah, I've seen some good stuff.
I know. Heather, should I be worried about any of this stuff? I mean, not that I'm afraid, but I've kind of wondered this in the past. Is this something I should really bring in? Now, if it was like, I don't know, something very obvious like, I don't know, like a pentagram, okay, like Heather, Whitney was talking about, some kind of an occultic symbol, I wouldn't do that. But I don't know. Do you wonder the same thing? Do you got, things in your house maybe, or, artifacts or things you're like, wow, and then you're kind of thinking, is this a good idea to have in my house? Do you think the same thing that I do?
A little part of me sometimes does, especially when it comes to some of the books in my library, because I have a lot of very old books. I like to collect books, and I have quite a few on demonology and witchcraft and some very dark arts. And they're for, and some of them look awfully scary. So they look kind of obvious, So, yeah. So
Heather, oh my gosh, you just brought something up that when you said books, I've never shared this with I've never shared this outside of anyone in my circle. And I think it would be appropriate, when you said the word books, something when I was, I must have been 19 years old. I rented a room from a lady who was widowed. I was in college. I was struggling to make it. And so she rented out a room for me so I could make it through college and not have to worry about paying a full rent. I just rented the room. And in this room, she had a small library shelf on the wall. And I'm a man of books. I've probably read 1,000 books in my life. And so I'm curious about what she's got. And in the corner was the book, The Exorcist. Now, as I said before, I don't watch horror movies. I just don't like to. They're not entertainment for me. And when I saw that book, it really kind of creeped me out. I didn't really want to dwell on it. And I didn't want to be rude and ask her to remove the book. And I thought, Aaron, you're being stupid. It's a book, okay? So just, go on and do your thing. So I, for months, when I would go to bed, I would see the book in the corner of that room on the bookshelf. And it always kind of bothered me a little bit. And one night, and this is a true story. This happened to me personally. One night, I was sleeping, and suddenly I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream, couldn't do anything. And it felt like a very malevolent, evil force had total control where I just couldn't do anything. I couldn't even twitch. Very, very ominous presence, a very dark, evil presence. And guess where that thing was at? Where? It was in that corner of that room where that book was. And I didn't see a shape, but it was like a darkness in the dark. It was like it had its own form of black. I could see a general outline shape. It was it was very powerful, but a very evil presence. And when that thing left, I shot up out of bed like never before in a cold sweat, wide awake, mind you. I was never asleep. Wide awake, broke out in a cold sweat, jumped out of bed, went running out of the room, and I picked up the phone and called my mother. That's how scared I was. And so when you said the word books, that brought back something that really happened to me. You know, when the person in the chat room asked, can good things attached to can entities, good entities attached to items? You know, for me, that experience changed my outlook on how I perceive, I guess, evil. Because for me, that night, that became very, very true for me. It still grips me, not in fear anymore. I don't live in fear in the thing, but look, for 2 weeks, I couldn't sleep with the light off. That's how bad it was. So, yeah, thanks, Heather, for bringing all that back up again.
Hey, it's Halloween.
It is Halloween.
But that's interesting that you talk about that paralyzing thing, because I've had that too, and I've talked to other people who say, have you ever woken up or you just like can't move? And you know, then for me it'd be like I feel like if I can say Jesus, then it'll stop, and it's like I can't open my jaw, and finally once I just barely get it out, bam, it's gone. And I've had that. I've heard other people say that too, like this numbing, like this paralyzing thing when you're sleeping. So I don't know.
Hi, we got Carol on the line from California. Carol, are you on? You're on with Dr. Heather Lynn.
Yes, I am on, and I am honored to be. Good evening, everybody.
Thanks for calling.
Enjoying the show. Well, you're welcome. Now, just kind of a loose frame for this, with all the things that we've heard about forever that go back to recorded time of objects having energy that does not connect to what they should normally have. Everything from books to dolls to haunted cabinets and haunted cupboards. I just wonder, Dr. Lynn, do you have any kind of inner feeling as to how we transfer this energy into objects?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I don't think that science allows us the capability to have a solid answer on that yet. But my personal feeling, just based on intuition, I think that we have such a strong force, such a strong energetic force, and I'm sure that it has something to do with just that energy exchange and vibrations, and something that's probably so far beyond what our science is able to, tell us now, that I don't know if we'll ever really understand. But I do think that maybe the ancients had an idea about it, given their sort of attunement to the natural world. I think that's something that we've sort of broken away from. So I think that...
yes, bro. And now do you here's the $64,000 question. Do you have a clue as to how we get back to that?
Well, I think it's I don't want to say simple, but I think a good simple start to that would be actually getting back to nature, getting out there more often. I know it seems like such a small step, but gosh, so long now, so many kids they don't even go outside and play anymore. People aren't going out in the forest. They're not getting in touch with nature at all. People don't know where their food comes from, where their water comes from. So we're so out of touch. And I think that maybe getting involved with some kind of just a nature retreat at the bare minimum. But I know there's a lot of things. People get involved with drum circles, or, maybe discussing things with shamans in various areas, just sort of making a concerted effort to get back in touch with that. I think that, and definitely, meditation or prayer, or just trying to get in touch with that original primitive self and what it means to actually be human. And I think that's going to be our best bet at reclaiming our humanity. And maybe we can get in touch with some of that, positive vibration again.
Awesome. Thanks, Carol,
I
for
love
calling
that.
in.
I love that. Well, thank you so very much. And that was
thank
more
you.
than a sufficient answer. Thank you.
No, thank you. You have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, we got just a little bit of time left with Dr. Heather Lynn. If you want to call in with your question, it's 1-888-919-2355 on our Halloween special here on Epic Voyages Radio. Heather, what has been your scariest moment? I mean, in real life. I threw a bone out there. I told you about my book story because you brought it all up, but
You're helping us go to bed on a happy note.
what's been your scariest moment? Archaeology, whatever. What has been your thing where you go, wow, that creeped me out? Other than the exorcism you attended, what's been the creepiest thing for you?
Yeah, the exorcism wasn't as scary as it was just weird and awkward. But in terms of the scariest thing, I don't easily scare except for one thing. And this is really sad. This is the truth, though, and I'm going to air it out. Since you aired out your whole exorcist book story, I am deathly afraid of bugs. Large
Heather.
bugs. I know.
Heather, this is a Halloween special.
I know.
Bugs can't scare you.
They do.
Spiders?
Nothing else. Just large bugs.
Okay, let's move away from the bugs. It's kind of like I got stuck on the goats earlier.
I'd rather sit through 15 exorcisms than to see one giant bug. I'm not talking ants or flies. I'm talking big ones.
Indiana Jones, where they're going through the thing, and they're having to go through all the insects in the Temple of Doom, I think.
Geez.
Yeah, okay. I give that to you because, I don't know that I would do that either. Yes, I don't blame you. What on the supernatural side have you experienced that has either creeped you out or frightened you or something you couldn't explain? Not bugs.
Well, not too much other than just the typical haunted house. I mean, I've gone through a lot of different historic homes or very old homes and doing some kind of, just preservation work. And sometimes those give me the creeps. But, I don't have anything specific that has to do with paranormal. I've been one of those unlucky people that I don't get UFO experiences, really. I don't get any kind of, ghostly phenomenon. Although I don't want to invite anything like that in. So, I don't want to put that out there. But I haven't had anything in particular that's actually been scary. Only real things. What really scares me are things like incidents where somebody was standing in my yard at about 3 a.m. a couple years back, and they were just standing there. And I look, and my dog's barking. So it's not I don't know that it's paranormal or what. It's more based in like a real thing. So I look out there, and there's a figure, and they're just standing there, and my dog is barking, and I didn't know what was going on. Well, I turned on the outside light, the lamp post, and they just stood there, and they were dressed all in black. And so luckily I have a 100-pound German Shepherd. And so I put my dog out at him. So did they run? No.
Or did they disappear?
They just stood there, and that freaked me out. My dog was on a lead, so they were just out of the way so that they, because I couldn't let my dog like totally loose. But they just stood there, and I thought, oh my gosh, they didn't budge. They didn't budge.
Flinch.
They didn't even flinch, and so that I about lost it at that point. I about lost it, and I didn't know. But I don't know if it's a ghostly, story or if it was just.
Was it on Halloween, by the way? Was this a Halloween night thing?
This was not. If it was, that would have been like the
so you'd be like, okay,
story.
Some creep out there, Halloween, okay,
That's
whatever.
Creepy enough. Bugs.
Yeah, this is just a normal day, a night, and then some guy, you're like, okay,
that was creepy.
Didn't even budge.
He ended up walking away, but just ever so casually. I don't know if he had the wrong house or if he was drunk or who knows. But I get scared of things that are like real and can actually happen, like, intruders or giant bugs. So
yeah. Okay. All right. Whitney, what about you? Have you had anything weird?
It's funny that I am a host on the Inception Radio Network, and I haven't really had any like supernatural weird stuff that I haven't really encountered aliens or demons or angels, but I've heard stories of people.
Right.
So my husband said thought he saw like a demon once.
Yeah.
And I know of somebody who said she saw an angel. But yeah, so sorry. And I'm like you, Aaron. I don't like watching like horror movies and stuff. I just don't get that adrenaline rush. I don't like that feeling. So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Okay, listen, we got a few minutes here with Dr. Heather Lynn. You're going to get in if you call 1-888-919-2355. Do it now. Pick up the phone. 888-919-2355. We got a few minutes left here. Wow, what a fascinating show. Wow, Halloween. Heather, is there anything else regarding evil archaeology that we didn't talk about? Anything at all? I know you're working on your book. It's not out yet, but tell us a little bit about, when you think it's going to be out and available.
It's probably going to be more towards 2015. And it's going to depend on some things with the publisher. So just have to keep going to the website, check, www.drheatherlynn.com and check for updates. You can sign up for my newsletter, and then I'll send you out all kinds of updates and interesting news stories and analysis on archaeological discoveries and all kinds of good stuff. So you can sign up for that on my website as well.
And I just posted the cover of your book again on InceptionRadioNetwork.com. And that deity that we were talking about earlier is on the cover of your book, Evil Archaeology. What a great cover, by the way. The history and lore of sinister relics. If you want to see the cover, I just posted it. Go and take a look at it. It's kind of creepy. It's not a big insect though. It should have been a big insect on the cover of your book, but yeah, what a fascinating show. Call in. We got a few minutes. 1-888-919-2355. Book's going to be out in 2015. You're working on it. It is a work in progress. What made you decide to investigate evil archaeology and write a book on it? Because you know what? When I saw this, I went, why didn't I do this?
Well, evil is unfortunately a part of our daily lives. It is something that we encounter, as a people, and we have since the dawn of time. So I think there is a lot to learn from looking at the past and looking at the archaeological record about what is evil, what it really is, what it means, and all the questions that we commonly have. I think that some of that can be figured out by looking towards the past. So I was just inspired to write about it. Hopefully it'll turn out. And like I said, this is a work in progress. So I want to invite anybody, if they have some kind of interesting exorcism story, or if they themselves are an exorcist, definitely contact me and I'll interview them and maybe include it in the book. But it's, like I said, it's still a work in progress, but I wanted to share it this evening because it was a very appropriate time of year to do so.
Absolutely, it was, and wow, what a great show! Thank you so much for coming on our Halloween special here on Epic Voyages Radio. Just what a fantastic thing! I can't wait for your book to come out. I think it's going to do very well. So early congratulations! Make sure you go to Heather's website, drheatherlynn.com, drheatherlynn.com, and check out what she has. She's already got some books out that you need to look at. The Renegade Archaeologist, by the way. Heather, I hope to get to work with you in the future on some kind of project.
I'd love that.
I know. It's pretty neat when you can find, people that you can, you can discuss things with like this. And so, I hope that one day I'll get to meet you. We'll get to do something together on some kind of a project, because there's not many of us out there that are kind of outside the box doing this, I can tell you.
Unfortunately, there's not. That's why we need to stick together.
I know. By the way, my journals came out, people have asked me, when are you going to publish your journals on Turkey and Peru? And I really thought hard about it. And so because you asked, I have done so. And if you go to aaronjudkins.com, both the journals are out. It is not a book. It is a journal.
I know. I'm interesting to read that. It sounds cool.
I know. I worked really hard. So it's out and available now. The Quest for Noah's Ark Expedition Journal chronicles my time in Eastern Turkey for 6 months, searching for Noah's Ark.
So
that was a real thing, and it's out. Yes.
I was wondering, Aaron, did you actually write the journal while you were doing it? Because
I did. Yeah.
If you had to take your fingers out from your glove to write in a journal, it's awfully cold up there. How did you make your fingers work?
Well, I climbed in the tent. Yes, it was very cold, but I did chronicle it every day, and it details about a 6 month journey before I even went, and then on the experiences on the mountain, and then I did the same for Peru when I went down there with L.A. Marzulli. We filmed Watchers 8. And so the Peru expedition journal's out, The Mystery of the Elongated Skulls, at aaronjudkins.com. They're both available now. I'm going to be at Laughlin, Nevada in November. If you go to aaronjudkins.com, the link is up there. Laughlin, Nevada at the Aquarius Hotel. I'm going to be there November 13th. A Friday night is the night I'm going to be speaking. November 30th, I think October 30th is the last day for a full weekend registration. That's what I'm trying to say, registration. George Norrie's going to be there along with a number of tremendous folks talking all weekend. And then I'm going to be there giving a talk on Friday night. I'll have the journals available. I'm going to have something special available too that's only going to be at the conference. Make sure you go there. And I'm working very closely with the History Channel. Go to aaronjudkins.com. I need you to poll. There's a link right there. I need your answer, your opinion, and your comments. Participate in the poll because your opinion counts. What would you rather see for a new TV show? So we're very, very close to having something, I think, come to fruition. So make sure you go check that out. Thanks for listening, everyone. This has been a terrific show. I enjoyed your participation in the chat room and calling in. Thank you so much, Dr. Heather Land, for our Halloween special. And it was awesome to have you on.
No, it was great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Whitney, thanks for being my co-host tonight.
Yeah, it's been so much fun keeping each other company here.
Yeah, we've never teamed up like this before, but it's been really cool to do so. So, listen, we're out of time, guys. Thanks so much. Remember, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Good night from all of us here. My producer, Joe Champion, Ken Cherry from Epic, Keith Rowland from the Dark Matter Radio Network, from the Valley of the Giants. You're listening to Epic Voyages Radio, and until next time, the truth is out there.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Please join us again next Monday evening for Extraordinary Phenomena Investigations Council's Epic Voyages. I'm Roger Peacock for Epic. Until next time.